Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends of the OR Thomas School of Leadership, welcome to yet another episode of Tintswalo's Perspective. It's such a great pleasure being here. And we'd like to apologize that last week we did not have an episode. This is precisely because we had some challenges with our schedule, but we were able to iron them out. And today we are here and we'll be having a very important conversation. As you all know, that Tintswalo's Perspective is a platform where young people from various sectors of society come together to discuss pertinent issues of national interest, but also speak about the work that they are actively involved in terms of transforming society for the better. Remember, we said that for this month we'll be doing a reflective journey in our history as part of celebrating Heritage Month. And I hope you guys had a wonderful Heritage Day yesterday, as well as the Pride Day. So today we'll be having a discussion really about the student movement, reflecting in the journey of the student movement. As we all know that this year marked the 100 years of the student movement in South Africa, which coincides with 33 years of Sasco. So it has been 33 years since Sasco was formed in 1991. But then the student movement also played a critical role in terms of our liberation struggle. Right from the formation of NUSAS in 1924, and you had the formation of student organizations such as the African Student Association, the African the African Students Union of South Africa. Then you had the formation of SASO, AZASO, and Sansco. Then in 1991, you had the merger of NUSAS and Sansco to form Sasco. And even in the post-apartheid era in our democratic dispensation, the student movement continues to play an active role in shaping discourse as well as influencing the necessary change. I mean, could speak about the struggles of Sasco, fighting for free education, fees must fall, roads must fall, the role of COSAS, the Congress of South African Students, which just held its national conference in the past 2 days. So we'll be having that discussion, and joining me to help me embark on this reflective journey is going to be the president of Sasco, Comrade Vezinhlanhla Simelane, who will be joining us shortly. I think he has been having trouble with network issues, but he will be joining us shortly to actually be part of this conversation. Let me just take his call quickly. He's calling me so that he can. Sincerely apologize for that. The president seems to be having challenges with logging in. He was in, but unfortunately, he's having some network challenges. So please bear with us. We are still resolving those. We'll be right back in a moment. Truly, truly apologize for this technical issue. Comrades and friends, we truly apologize for that. This thing of technology, sometimes you plan for things and then it turns out that, you have to do some extra work to get things working. But we truly apologize for that. The president has joined us, and as I said, we're about to have a conversation which seeks to reflect on the journey of the student movement in South Africa, which coincides with 33 years of Sasco. So we are about to start our conversation, and I truly apologize on behalf of the president with the challenges that he was having. But now he's about to join us. President, thank you so much for really making the time to join us. And I've already apologized to our guests about the technical issues that we're facing. So I'd kindly ask you to introduce yourself so that we can kickstart the conversation.
Thank you very much to you, and greetings to our comrades, our viewers. Greetings to the entire leadership of Sasco, from national to all our structures, and of course to all our members of Sasco. My name is Comrade Vezinhlanhla Simelane, the current president of Sasco. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, President. As I said, that we're going to take a reflective journey into the student movement in South Africa. And maybe the first thing that we must do is try to explain as to why are we speaking about 100 years of the student movement? What informs our determination that it's actually 100 years of the student movement? Maybe if you can give us that brief history that would allow people to understand why we speak about this 100 years instead of any other number.
Thanks once again. I think comrades and friends would understand that of course, we're celebrating our anniversary this month. This is our month of September, where maybe all, I think it's Youth League and ourselves, it's our birthday month. So, what, 33 years? Ordinarily, Comrade Chair, you will be celebrating the 33 years of the strike in the history of Sasco. But again, because we do understand that before 1991, when Sasco was formed at Rhodes University from the 1st of September to the 6th of September, where SANCO and NUSAS merged to form one organization called Sasco, an unracial organization and sexist organization. But we do also understand that even before the formation of Sasco in 1991, the history of student activism did not start in 1991. According to our history, it started in 1924, where at that time you only had in the majority white people who were allowed to access universities and all of those things. But of course, there were some group of generations, black people who were part of who access higher education at that time. So the reason why we're celebrating 100 years as an organization is because our historical understanding is that you can't erase the struggles that happened before 1991. So we are celebrating 100 years of student activism in this country, because in our view, we do believe that if it was not for many young people who participated, who organized students in the sector during those times, many leaders who came before us, former leaders of Africa, you count the likes of Robert Mugabe, who was a student at the University of Fort Hare, many others, the list is endless. So the activism is an appreciation from us as Sasco that if it was not for the generation dating back from 1919 to 1924, maybe today we would not have something called South African Student Congress. So it's important for us to, when we link our historical background as an organization, were able to link it from 1924, when we say that is when the student activism came across in the country, then led to many organizations that were formed during the apartheid regime. Later, then in 1991, then Sasco was then formed during that period. So that is the reason why we thought that maybe it's important to celebrate 100 years of student activism in this country. Of course, there are many organizations that they were formed in the democratic dispensation, but Sasco remains one of the most fundamental pillar in terms of our democratic society, and the history of Sasco, and how people who participated before 91 helped to form a very important organization, of which is Sasco today.
Thank you for that, President. So we are locating this journey right from the formation of NUSAS, which was a predominantly white liberal institution, because it's white people who had access to institutions of higher education in the main, and therefore were able to organize. But also we started from that position because we recognize that NUSAS played a particular role, even in agitating against, the system of exclusion to some extent, because you would remember before NUSAS, there was the Africana Student Association, but it was a very conservative, regressive organization that we cannot account for in the fold of the progressive student movement. Now, there's a mantra in Sasco which is very important, and I think I would like us to tap into that particular mantra in trying to understand the role that students have played in shaping society right from 1924 up until to today. And that mantra is that we are members of the community first before our students, which really speaks about the fact that our struggles are not in isolation from societal struggles, right? And therefore, the question is, how would you summarize the role that students have played in the student movement to shape discourse, to shape society, to agitate for transformation, right from 1924 up until present day?
Thanks once again. One of the things that when we joined Sasco, because we'll speak also about our experience we in Sasco, because that's the organization that we know. Other organization, of course, will then read about them in terms of history, get to understand the conditions of that time when those who participated. But also, there are similarities, because at the end of the day, it remains we remain a student movement. So when we joined Sasco, one of the things, as I was saying, that we were taught is that before you are a student, you are a member of the community. As we are correctly saying, that institutions of higher learning are a microcosm of society. So in essence, it means that whatever challenges that you come across at the campus level, issues of inequality, poverty, they manifest themselves through having challenges of accessing higher education, financial exclusions. They manifest themselves in terms of having challenges of accommodation. They manifest themselves in many ways. So then Sasco teaches us that the challenges that we're experiencing here on campus are actually a reflection of what society is. So therefore, our participation or us trying to bring about solutions to the challenges that we're experiencing on our campuses, we need not only to deal with them in isolation from broader challenges of society. That is when then we're able to understand that it means the struggle of students on campus basis is linked to a broader struggle of society in terms of the triple challenge that we are facing and so on. So we as the student movement show dating back from 1924, we have been able to contribute to the development of this society. There are many struggles that we'll remember, because this discussion must also include comrades from COSAS, the uprising in 1976. Those were students who took it upon themselves to go to the streets and fight for the liberation of this country. There are many things on policy positions, and some point Sasco spoke against many policies that seek to take back our democracy. I remember 5 years ago, if not 4 years ago, 4 years ago, there were some challenges of budget cuts. And when Sasco spoke out and said, we are against the budget cut because it means that the system is going to exclude the poor of the poor to access higher education. So our intervention in the student movement or student movement and the student activism broadly in the country is not only trying to address sectoral issues, because universities and TVET college of higher education, it is a sectoral environment, but we do have an understanding that when you tackle these matters, you must take them in a broader society, but also because on daily basis there are issues on campuses that Sasco must continuously raise, but members of Sasco themselves, because these are the things that you are taught in the organization, especially when you're in an introductory level, when you are taught about the theory of the movement that we use to analyze society, is the very same theory that assists us in terms of analyzing these inequalities poverty, and all other social ills. Then at a university level or a campus level, it is when we do have an opportunity to do research in terms of how then to address the issues of society. Because if you are not addressing issues of society, it means that we are going to experience the very same challenges that our parents experience. So we are finding a very good space where there's knowledge production, and we always urge our members that we must use the limited space that we have in higher education, because we are not there permanently, to find solution in our problems that we are facing as a society. So Sasco is a very important pillar in terms of fighting the social ills and other issues that affect our society. So therefore, we do have that understanding that whatever we do, we must bear it in mind that we have a huge responsibility to address issues of society, not only of our country. Sasco is an international organization. We participate in SADC with other organizations from other countries in Africa and of that of the world, where we're able to shape the future of this continent and of the world, because at the end of the day, the future of this country is ourselves as young people. So if we're not participating, and if we're not forcing our participation, it's going to be difficult for those who are at the helm to think on our behalf, because they will not understand the interest that we're having as young people. So in general, Sasco is a very important pillar in the mass democratic movement in South Africa. There are many achievements that we have achieved as an organization. Maybe as in when we move forward, we'll also speak about those things.
Yeah, definitely, President. We'll come to those things. But what I'm hearing, which is important to emphasize, is that seemingly there exists a very intricate umbilical cord link between the evolution of the student movement and the development of society as a whole. So you cannot divorce the role of students in agitating for change in your account of how the South African society has developed over time. I mean, when we go back in history, as I spoke a little bit about the fact that NUSAS was also agitating for a particular change, it played a particular role in fighting the unjust system to a particular point. When you look at, when you speak about the fact that campus is a mirror reflection of society, you'd remember even the breakaway of Sasco from, or the breakaway that led to the formation of Sasco from NUSAS was as a result of the fact that Black student leaders felt that they were not treated well, because every time they had to go to conferences, they had to be booked differently from their white counterparts. They had to eat in different settings, and they had to be confronted with issues of past laws and all of that. And seemingly, NUSAS was not doing enough to address that particular injustice, and they felt as if they were just tokenist participants. And that's why then they decided, you know what, we are going to break away and form Sasco, which also played a very critical role in shaping society. The 1976 that you speak about was as a result of the consciousness that derived from the Black conscious movement, But I think also the other important issue to raise here is the practicality of giving expression to that mantra, which I would want us to touch on later on when we speak about challenges faced today. Because when you look at Sasco, for example, very rooted in the community, right? Forming different associations such as the Black People's Convention, which led to the formation of Black unions, working together with NAFCOC, doing projects that produced clinics, produced community-based centers. Even, in fact, the formation of COSAS can be traced from that energy to want to be rooted in the community, right? To say, we're not going to just fight on campus, but we're going to take these ideas and practicalize them in the community so that they are able to benefit the community. So I think it's very important to capture that in mind, that this umbilical cord link is important, because then when we then reflect, it's not just a matter of Sasco or any other particular student formation, but it's really about the role young people, particularly as students and learners, have played in the development of our society. So with that being said, President, let's get to these victories that you spoke about and say, what has been the role of Sasco in particular, because it shares 33 years in this 100 years experience, right? What has been its role in terms of shaping the democratic society, right? And what are the challenges that it had to encounter? What are the victories and some of the defeats that it had encountered in playing an active role in building this democratic project that we are engaged in towards the national democratic society?
Now, I think one of the victories that our organization, since its inception, that we're proud, and we are saying we've done a lot, but a lot also still need to be done. You remember, access to higher education was very difficult before 1991, and when the government of the ANC took over power in 1994. Sasco, on the other hand, was also trying to conceptualize challenges of higher education, to say what are challenges in the sector, because at that time, when the ANC took power in 1994, many of our comrades did not have experience in terms of governance and all of those things. So Sasco was very instrumental at a level of higher education in terms of the challenges, the question of access. That our struggle as an organization till today is that of free education. But part of the achievements that I can say, of course, not only Sasco alone, but if you have a listening government of the African National Congress that were able to make them to understand what is the importance of addressing these matters, because they also speak to the Freedom Charter when it says doors of learning shall be opened for all. So you'd remember that at some point we had what we call TEPSA, the generation that came before. They fought for access. It was difficult to access education. They then fought. TEPSA was introduced under the ANC government. Then there is progress in relation to issues of access when it comes to the monetary aspect of it. In many years, you'll also recall that in this whole country, Sasco is the only organization that we used to have matches to Department of Higher Education for free education each and every year. There was no organization at that time who would have believed that Sasco was correct to march to criticize society, because that was a campaign that we used to do each and every year to say our struggle remains that of free education, and we want our government to implement free education. And later on, maybe to fast forward to go to Fees Must Fall, at that time, many organizations, society, even civil society, they then believe that indeed, in a form of fees must fall, even if we'll have to explain the context, what was our view in relation to what has happened at that time. But if it wasn't for SARS who was campaigning for free education over the years, it was going to be difficult for civil society to get to appreciate that indeed free education is possible in our country. As much as in terms of our content, when we speak about free education, you'll understand that we don't only pay attention on the monetary aspect, but even in terms of the content of education, what kind of education we are saying as Sasco we want to have in order to address the social ills that we spoke about in terms of society, But the reason why I'm giving this background in terms of today what we have with NSFAS, that is before it became a bursary, it was a loan. You see, if it wasn't for SARS who was pushing for us to get to a society where we understand that the children of the working class, the offsprings of the working class, they can't access higher education because of their historical background, inequality, and all of those things. So SASCO, today you can proudly claim that over 1 million of students in this country are funded by the ANC government, are funded by the government, and that was through the intervention of those who came before us in the very same organization called Sasco. Others, they then join along the way, because if you check our history, I think we're the oldest student movement in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. So some of the things that today we are proud as an organization is that our government is funding over 1 million students in terms of NSFAS in the form of a bursary. That is a very huge achievement, as I've said earlier on. But also, I'm still saying that as much as we've achieved that, we need to take the question of the content of education as an organization, so that we can fully say that indeed we have fulfilled our struggle of free education. Because the challenges of society that me and you spoke about earlier on, it is going to be very difficult for us to address those challenges if we're not speaking directly to the question of what kind of education are we receiving in terms of content. Because when you go to school, in our view, Paulus Ferrell will argue about that as well. When you go to school, you have a responsibility to go to school and come up with solutions that are going to address the inequalities of society and all of those things. So we don't need a banking kind of education where you go to school, you deposit information, later on you must then be asked to take out the information that has been deposited. It should be a space where we're debating in terms of how can we fix the issues of society and all of those things. So one of the challenges that we're having today, and we've been having this challenge for a very long time, is the issue of the institutional autonomy in universities that promote academic freedom, takes away the right of us to ensure that the content of education is the one that is needed by society to address issues of society. So where we're sitting as an organization, we do believe that as much as we can proudly say we have achieved, others would argue that it's free education, it's bursary loans and all of the it's bursary, but we have achieved the monetary aspect of free education. What we need to take now as an organization in order to address permanently issues of society is that of the content of education. That is a very difficult one to do, because you understand that the ruling class, of which is the bourgeoisies, their ideas are dominant in society. And the space that we are in of education is a very contested space of education, contested space where the ruling class, the capitalists, have interest in terms of what knowledge is being produced. The knowledge that is being produced at universities is the knowledge that must continue to maintain the current system that produces inequality, unemployment, and poverty. So it's a struggle that it does not only need Sasco to pay attention to. The broader movement must be able to assist us in terms of turning things around, especially when you tackle the question of institutional autonomy, because that is where they are able to hide all of those things that they are doing behind the doors, where they are saying that they are promoting academic freedom and all of those things. So one of the major challenges that we need to have is to ensure that we take that issue. There are many challenges of today. Challenges the question of student accommodation in the sector is it is very an issue that we think it must be an ongoing program of Sasco campaigning about it, engaging relevant people in terms of trying to address that major challenge. We have made our presentation to the movement. The government is aware that indeed there is a shortfall of beds in this country, because if you are unable to be in a conducive environment as a student, it's very difficult for you to perform academically. So we are trying to ensure that we achieve access and success, because if we have been able to access higher education, we must not only end there, but must also pay attention to what might be a problem for you to succeed. So that is why we're saying all of those challenges, your student accommodation crisis. One of the challenges that we're having in this country is a question of gender-based violence that is happening in our campuses. We also have engaged our department to say police must not only come when there are question of people who are fighting on campuses and all of those things. GBV, there must be a specific intervention by our South African Police Service to say on GBV we're assigning there's a unit that deals with GBV, because it's a very serious problem that we're having in society. Of course, as we said earlier on, that those challenges of crime on our campuses are a reflection of what is happening in society. So when we're dealing with these challenges on our campuses, we must also advise government to say holistically now, this is how we must be able to tackle these matters, because at least we have an opportunity to do research about how can we provide solutions to these challenges. So I think indeed there are things that we've been able to achieve. And also on the question of the content, it also speaks about because we don't have to have people who are going to study for the sake of study. The skills, we must have skills that are going to help the economy to grow. You must visit other countries to see if we are in a fourth industrial revolution, how can we make sure that the skills that are being produced by our campuses, our universities and TVET colleges are actually going to assist us to ensure that these graduates, they do have access to jobs in their own, they can be able to create jobs for themselves at the end of the day. Because one of the major problems that we're having is that we have a number of unemployed graduates. Those people who have studied, they've got skills. It's not like they are unemployable. They are employable, but the quality and the courses that are being, are being produced at the level of university and TVET colleges, they don't actually help the economy. So, in our view, one of the things that you must also look into, of which remains a challenge even today, is the is the kind of skills that we're producing that is not helpful to our economy, that is not helpful also to those who have been graduating, because we don't want to produce graduates that would sit at home. They must be able to be absorbed by the economy. So it is important that we one of the interventions that we thought we must do is to reindustrialize our economy as a country, so that we are able to produce people who are fit for the economy, people who can be able to be absorbed by the economy. There are many challenges that we are facing in the sector, but we do believe that having a stronger Sasco will be able to encounter all of those challenges.
No, thank you for that, President. You've spoken a mouthful, and I think we'll come back to this question of, forging towards a stronger Sasco, because there are notable organizational challenges, which I would like us to touch on a bit, and the kind of interventions that are being imagined. But I do welcome questions and comments from our viewers. You can share whatever comment or ask any question. I'll be able to pose it on screen to the President. I also want to ask you, President, about this relationship that we have with the ANC as Sasco, as to what informs it and what is its genesis, and how does it practically play out? Because there are people who assume that Sasco is an ANC student movement. I mean, you even see it, for example, on social media during SRC elections. People would refer to Sasco as ANC minions or whatever derogatory term they use, but there is this close association with the ANC. What informs that relationship, and how is it sustainable in practical terms?
Okay, thanks for that question. You are right. On social media, they always say they can't differentiate between Sasco and the ANC. And it's something that, as an organization, I think, as much as there is a difference, because to begin with, Sasco is an independent organization. I think society must be able to understand that. We are part of what we call the mass democratic movement. We have a strategic relationship with the African National Congress and all other organizations within the mass democratic movement. Your SACP, COSATU, SANCO. We do have, what unites us is what we call the National Democratic Revolution. Because Sasco believes that for us to be able to address the imbalances of the past, as the NTR speaks about addressing the imbalances of the past, is that NTR is the way to go. So our relationship with the ANC, like any other organization within the mass democratic movement, is informed by the National Democratic Revolution, and will remain an independent organization. But in terms of our views, if we see that there's something that is not going right in terms of now what the NDR explains, we are able to contradict the ANC. We have what we call the CC approach, where we complement the ANC when it's doing well, where we contradict the ANC when we contradict the ANC when the ANC is not doing well, and the government of the ANC as well. There are many occasions where, as an organization, Sasco, we came out strongly, marching against the ANC government. People will say that, why now these kids are marching against their own organization? It's because if we see that there's something wrong, that they are not doing right, we have a responsibility to come out. I remember in 2021 or 2022, if I'm not mistaken, I think I made this point earlier on. There was a budget cut by Department of Higher Education to NSFAS. We went to Cape Town when the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, was addressing a budget vote. We went to Cape Town ourselves as Sasco, and we protested. outside asking that the government of the ANC, because the ANC, in terms of its policies and in terms of the idea of the NDR, that we took a decision that we want to be part of the agenda, the transformation agenda is that you can't then, if you are saying our people must have access to higher education, then you are cutting the budget. We stood up out firmly as an organization. We said, no, we are saying no to this. And I can tell you that they then changed their decision because they were able to listen to what we were saying as an organization. So we, as I was saying, that that is the relationship that we have with the ANC. It's not guarantee that the relationship that we have is not a relationship between the mother and the child, where maybe it's family related and all of those things. Like I said earlier on, that our relationship with the ANC is a strategic relationship. So it's not a question of being the student wing of the ANC. I think in this country, Sasco is the only organization that is not a student wing, but people are they are unable to differentiate between the student wing and the movement. So, yes, of course, we can't take it away that the ANC has played a very meaningful role in ensuring that Sasco becomes what it is today. But Sasco has never compromised its independence. It has never compromised its independence. But I can tell you today that the day we see that the ANC is deviating from the National Democratic Revolution, it is when many people are going to say that Sasco actually is an independent organization. There are many instances where we've disagreed with the ANC public. And the ANC has never taken that as if it's a fight against the ANC. It's because they do understand that Sasco is independent and the relationship between Sasco and the ANC is informed by what? So even today, my brother, we still believe that the National Democratic Revolution is the correct and the ANC is the correct organization to lead the mass democratic movement. We might have our own setbacks in terms of how we have performed in the last previous elections in terms of the broad movement. Now, we also have had our own setbacks as an organization, whom at some point you can argue that they were linked to how the ANC was performing in all of those things. But our relationship, as we have asked, is that of informed by the National Democratic Revolution. And the day we realize that the ANC is no longer driving the NDR correctly, it is when then I'm going to see Sasco taking a different post.
No, thank you, President. And I think your last input around the outcome of elections and the strategic setback, it's something I would like to come back to before we conclude this conversation. And I think it's important to always clarify this relationship, right? To say the primary basis of it is the fact that Sasco believes that the National Democratic Revolution is actually a revolution that will guarantee victory not only for society but for students. So students themselves, particularly those from the working class background, the blacks in general and Africans, stand to benefit the most from us achieving the strategic goal of a national democratic society. And therefore your relationships and your engagement with society as a whole, not just with the ANC, but all key stakeholders, whether be it unions in the labor movement, business, civil society, is based on trying to advance this revolution because primarily you believe that students stand to benefit the most from achieving the revolution, So there are a number of questions here, President, which really touch on organizational issues, and I think I should bring them in before I go ahead and ask you about 2 or 3 more questions. I think we'll end at around 7:30 because we had that technical delay. I hope you'll have time for us up until then. So the first question is from Spiwe Hadebe, who says the deteriorating of political quality in the branches of the MDM components in society reflects on Sasco in the higher education sector. What is the plan? What is the plan? What is the plan? The NEC has to renew and rebuild the movement. So basically speaking to those organizational challenges, I think KB also is asking about those organizational challenges, saying you are tapping on very serious, tangible issues of students. But then my ask is that, CADA President, how do you champion for such with branch leaders who condone mediocrity? We need leaders at a campus level who are voted in based on merits, not because they know who in the region or province. National structure needs to come back to branches where critical issues are, are especially in the content of the curriculum and the residences are involved. So basically saying that you need to intervene in terms of the quality of leaders at a branch level, but also we need to close the gap that exists between national leaders and branches. And I think adding an overarching sort of question to both these questions, which are really dealing with the organizational structures, is, over the last decade or so, we have seen conflicts amongst leaders of Sasco that play out in the public discourse, right? And there is some sort of a very worrying pattern that it's always the presidency and the SGO that get to fight. In some instances, they take each other to court. But also, this playing out in public creates a particular perception. So, how do we deal with resolving those particular conflicts so that they don't happen moving forward? Especially in the context where I think you've spoken a bit about it, but we'll touch on it wherein we're losing campuses, the NDR itself is under threat, at all levels, right? So how do you build the right sort of progressive cohesion between leaders and sustainable unity amongst members? Because when leaders fight at that level, unfortunately, what it does is that it even divides the members themselves, because there will be these ones who want to side with the presidency versus these ones who want to side with the SGO. And we have seen this really play out I think in the last conference, where you had two separate conferences and this issue had to be even mediated at a court level. So in addressing that issue of organizational challenges, can you please also touch on this issue of conflicts amongst leaders, which for me is the most painful and disheartening matter to witness?
No, thanks again. Thanks to comrades for asking questions as well. I must, of course, agree that indeed we do have challenges in organization, of which they didn't start like in the previous Congress of Sasco. In my reflection, they date back from where things, even if we're not there, but in terms of history, we know from Venda Congress 2013, Maheken Congress, you could see some elements where there was an element of violence within the organization that we have never seen in the history of Sasco, because what we do understand is that in Sasco, it's all about debate. Where you differ with comrades, it's on the level of, it's on the ideological level. Others would argue that, remember the discussion that we normally had in Sasco was Sasco must be a Marxist organization, or we should continue to use Marxism and Leninism as a tool of analysis. So those used to be the heated discussion within the organization, and of course will be appreciated, because at that time it was helping us to be able to grasp the theory of the movement, so that when we try to provide solution to our problems, we diagnose the problem correctly. Because without grasping the theory of the movement, it will be very difficult difficult to diagnose the problem. And once you have misdiagnosed the problem, the cure would be wrong. So the lack of political training in organization, I think, in my view, is the one that has made us to be where we are today. Because people who join Sasco or the movement broadly, they now no longer joining the organization, but they are becoming members of members because of interest. People are introduced to the organization when a certain leader is fighting with another leader. So everyone that you recruit during that period, you recruit on the basis that this is what you must fight for. Remember, the new people who are joining, and they're joining in the period where the factionalism is too high, they are unable to understand what is the organization, because only what they're introduced to is the question of, for me, what defines politics for me is for me to be always fighting against certain comrades. So even if those leaders who came before who were fighting have left the organization, there is no one who comes and say, this is the organization, these are the principles, this is the theory of the movement, this is what you need for you to be able to understand our organization, because our organization has a responsibility to address issues of society. So the moment you begin to fight alone, we are now losing the momentum. We are now losing hegemony because we're no longer spending more time in addressing issues of society. It also speaks about the lack of performance that we've been experiencing, whether it's the movement broadly or our Sasco and campus. The hegemony that we've lost as a movement or as Sasco is informed by not focusing on issues that we're supposed to be focusing on as an organization in addressing student issues on campuses. We're no longer doing that. In my view, it's because there's a lack of politics within the organization. We need to intensify political education so that our comrades get to understand why initially they joined the very same organization that they're claiming to be members of. But I think one of the fundamental issues that even informs the behavior is the social challenge that we're having in society. People or our own comrades, we have tended to use the organization to address issues of, for instance, there is a question of unemployment in this country. People are no longer, they stay longer, and they see Sasco as a vehicle for them to be able to open doors where they can be able to have access to resources, even if it's a smaller scale, because it's a campus-based organization. But for that, they are able to survive because Sasco is known to be an influential organization at the campus level. So I'm saying that, Comrade Chair, is that if we are not careful in terms of using our organization, using our movement to address social ills, we're going to end up making sure that we're fighting for positions, because now the only vehicle that is there for us to be able to amass the resources is this organization that we're leading. So that is why people will fight tooth and nail to become leaders, not because their interest is to serve the people. In the main, the interest is because of their own selfish, narrow interest. And we're not saying that we're directing this to certain individuals, but it's an analysis that I think we have made in the broader movement, that to say, actually, this is the problem that we're having. But and again, it goes back to the question of how do we intensify political education? The Tambo School of Leadership. I think there is the work that we are doing, comrade, and we do believe that if you can be able to expand the work, because you don't only have to maybe educate people who are at a level of NSC, people who are at a level of PCs. You need to start from the branches where we are supposed to at least help those comrades who are joining the organization, so that when they grow, at least they are able to grasp what is needed for them in order to advance the interests of our society. Because, like I'm telling you, it's very dangerous to be a member of the member, and you don't. When it happens, you as a member of a member, we are not aware that actually in real terms we are not a member of the organization. We are just wearing a t-shirt of Sasco. Then you claim to be a member of an organization. A member of an organization has responsibilities that you must be able to do. An activist on a campus basis, if we're an active branch of Sasco, there are things that it's not about the question of um, paying membership. So therefore, we have an active branch of Sasco. I think Comrade Zogo, in one of the political classes of Youth League before there was NEC of the Youth League, he mentions that an active branch of the ANC, in our context, we're going to speak about SARS, an active branch of the ANC, you must know how many in your ward. You must know how many schools do you have, what are challenges at that particular school, how many potholes are there in a ward, and all of those things. So in our cases as Sasco, an active branch of Sasco must know that how many students in this particular university who go to bed without having a slice of bread. You must know that in a branch of Sasco, how many students who don't have access to books. You must know that in this campus, how many clubs and societies that are unable to do their activities because there's a shortage of budget. All of those things, you must be everywhere. But you can't understand that if you don't understand our organization. And if you have never went through processes where we are being taught more about the movement and in terms of not only organizational processes, but the revolution itself. Why were we involved in a struggle? What made us to form an organization? Why we didn't fight this badly individually? So why there was a need to form an organization? So people, we need to understand and all of those things. But somehow it does happen that the infights that were mentioned are happening at a level of people that in your view believe that they've undergone this particular education. So what then informs these fights? Because these people, if you see, they are senior leaders of the movement. They've went through all the courses that are there in the organization. So what is it that is problematic? It goes back to what I said earlier on. It's now the question of interest. The individual interest has superseded the interest of an organization, because it's wrong to be like that. An organization, if the organization is fighting inequality, is fighting unemployment, if the struggle is successful of unemployment, it means all of us who are unemployed are going to be employed. It can't be that I'm going to use this organization for my particular interest. But all in all, I think the solution to this is to intensify more on political education. Without doing that, we are doomed for failure.
No, I totally agree with your analysis, and I'm particularly interested in this question of a deteriorating organizational culture, wherein the culture of the organization no longer resides with the organization, but it resides in the hands of factions, cabals, and this thing that you are speaking, this phenomenon that you are referring to of members. Because people deliberately stifle the work of the organization in order to pacify those who take care of their interests. That's why you find that branches are no longer meeting regularly to discuss issues. I mean, I remember when I joined Sasco, just to make the point, 2014, Wits University, and would go into meetings from around 6 in the evening up until 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning, discussing issues that are facing students on campus and how to resolve them. Not even discussing the leadership question. In fact, the leadership question, you realize that it becomes a very easy conversation to have once you have done a proper analysis of what needs to be done. I remember one of the debates that we used to have, and it's a serious debate, not a debate in passing. It's whether or not we should contest SRC elections. And it wasn't a simple yes or no answer, you know. We had to convince ourselves that yes, we must, because if we don't, we leave a particular vacuum, right? But when we do contest, this is what we must do when we get into those offices, responding to these particular material conditions. So, as the school, we are really interested in intensifying our relationship with Sasco and all MDM structures to actually respond to this question of this deteriorating organizational culture. Because if we don't fix that, my view is that we may never reclaim our hegemony in society, because everything starts with a culture that you adopt, as a mode of prosecuting the revolution, right? If the culture is wrong, then we can do whatever we want, President. We can change leaders, put in new ones, but they will be contaminated by this culture that is bad, right? So we really need to invest time in fixing the organizational culture and ensuring that we cultivate a progressive culture that is able to produce activists. Because the student movement, part of its victories in the development of society is that it has given society leaders. Can speak about President Thabo Mbeki, you can speak about Nelson Mandela, O.R. Tambo, Thasi Sulu, Biko, Robert Sobukwe, Pani Pichani, most vice chancellors, are former student leaders. Most people in the private sector who are leading at a senior level, particularly Black people, are also from the student movement, right? But if you don't build the right culture, you are going to produce these defects, and then they come and occupy higher echelons of power in society in other sectors. And then the continued deterioration of the moral fiber of society, because these people that are going through this wrong culture unfortunately get to then lead at other levels in society and then reproduce the same bad things that we're seeing. So we are really interested, President, in intensifying that relationship, and we can have a conversation offline of how do we formalize that particular relationship, because we did attempt as the school to engage with Sasco branches at a campus level, but we were met with a number of challenges which we can discuss offline. So, President, I want to come back before we um, move towards closer to this question of being members of the community first before our student leaders, and reflect on this moment that we're in post the last elections, wherein for the first time in history, the ANC did not receive the majority of the votes. It received, of course, the largest portion of the electoral support, but it was not sufficient for it to be able to form the executive arm of government on its own. It had to then form a GNU, right? To say, one, how does Sasco characterize this moment? But secondly, what do you believe is your role at this current conjuncture as the student movement in shaping a particular future that South Africa must drive towards? Especially when you consider that there are, conversations around the need to have a a national dialogue to produce a particular social compact that must move the country towards greener pastures. What is Sasco's view around that? What are the key critical issues that you guys want to be on the agenda of that national dialogue? And what kind of social compact do you want that national dialogue to produce? And here, I'm speaking about the broader society. I'm saying yes, your sectorial issues are important, but here's a moment wherein there is a strategic setback on this national democratic revolution we spoke about. What is Sasco's view? Is it prepared to actually influence discourse at this particular moment in a way that will produce a particular outcome that is favorable to the student movement and in particular Sasco?
Maybe number one, it is serious. It is a setback for the movement, I must say. We have made analysis when we were engaging that actually the question of us losing hegemony in society because we are no longer doing the right things that we are supposed to be doing as the movement. Because science teaches us that nature does not allow a vacuum. So the reason why we find ourselves in this situation is because indeed there was a vacuum and anything can occupy a vacuum. Two, we as an organization, we have accepted the outcomes and the government that is in place today. But I must say that from a movement perspective or a movement point of view, there is an appreciation that there must be a national dialogue where we can be able to have a nation having dialogue in terms of what then do we see South Africa in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years, our future. And of course, we have to participate as Sasco so that we can also air our views on that. But also, I must say, Comrade Mkari, that the National Conference of the ANC, in our view, at an organizational level now, is the platform where that national dialogue was speaking about is supposed to be taking place.
Yeah.
Because why I'm saying this is because the ANC is a leader of society.
Yeah.
The moment you lose the hegemon, Comrade Mkari, you begin to have what we're discussing now in a form of national dialogue. If the ANC won these elections above 50%, it means in a scientific term, it will mean that the ANC is still enjoying hegemony in society. But because of the very same result, we can't then say we cannot have the national dialogue because we want everybody to participate in society, in shaping our country moving forward. But we must state it very clear that in actual fact, is the movement, the national conference of the ANC is the one that is a good platform to deliberate on the future of this country. In the national conference of the ANC, my brother, you'll know, there is no main organization that participate in that conference of the ANC because they want to contribute on policy positions. Civil society organization, they are always involved in the conference of the ANC. Business organization, they're always involved in the conference of the ANC. Not only organizations within our country, but international organizations are interested. What becomes a discussion on policy position within the African National Congress, because the ANC is the lead.
Well, I think we lost the president there. I don't know what happened. Hopefully he's able to come back, but he was making the point that in as much as the call for a national dialogue is welcomed, Sasco firmly believes that actually this dialogue has to take place first at a Congress level of the African National Congress, which I agree with. In fact, I wrote a about 20 pages input discussing the implications of the GNU right after the elections, before it was even formed, just after the 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 decision was announced to form a GNU. And one of the things I said, President, is, in fact, in the same vein that we recognize that there's a need for a national dialogue, I think we need to have a national consultative conference of the ANC, right? And my view is informed by you cannot say as a leader of society that this is a moment of fundamental consequence and therefore it requires the nation to come together and speak without you actually going to assess yourself and introspect. Because in fact, the agenda of this national dialogue, it has to be it highly influenced by the ANC. So the ANC and the broader mass democratic movement, and that's why I posed this question even to you, has to go into that national dialogue with particular positions, with a particular vision of the country moving forward, to say in the next 10 years, this is what we want to do, and these are the practical things we want to see happening. So that we don't go there and we discuss having not fully prepared, because we need to ensure that we influence that outcome, but we also socialize that outcome of the national dialogue, so that at the end of the day, whatever social compact comes out of it is not seen as an elite pact, right? Of elite political leaders, bureaucrats, business leaders, but it is accepted as a social product of all South Africans who are actively buying into this new vision, but also feel responsible to do something to make it happen. Because part of the problem, President, is that we have often taken away the responsibility of citizens by saying we will do things on their behalf, right? And that's why then there is this dependency syndrome. There is this self-entitlement mentality, which sometimes is correct, because if people elect a government, they expect certain things for government to do. But it's also our responsibility as a leader of society to make people understand that they also have a role to play in building this national democratic society, such that when a Giffens is sitting alone, he knows that whatever qualification I'm getting, whatever that I'm doing, I am also playing an active role in building towards a society that we want. I'm not doing it for my own sake. All of these things are not just bragging rights or attainments, but they are tools to help me play an active role in the developmental agenda of my country. And I think your assertion that the national conference is a key point where all these issues should be discussed, it's a very, very progressive. So we lost you there a bit. Before you finish that thought, I'll just like to slot in some few questions so that you can respond to all of them at once, and then we'll move towards closure. There was a question here by Litu Tula says, he's asking around the question of TVET and university branches, that there is no equal treatment. And he says the example is the current ongoing SRC elections. TVET branches are not being assisted with T-shirts and other important resources, whereas universities and University of Technology branches are treated as darling of the higher education structure. How do we then fix this historical issue of rooting out this element of discrimination of TVET branches? How do we build one Sasco for every member and every branch? And then there's another question here, President, which I thought is important. It's from Christopher Spusiso. Says, I'm just worried by the way comrades are using other comrades for their own benefit. President, may you please kindly advise comrades how all these kind of things affects the party for the next term of office. I think you've spoken a bit about it, but the key thing here is to say, what word of advice can you give to future leaders so that they can avoid these things continuing? And then, yeah, I think those are the questions, President. And then maybe you can also speak a bit about the internationalist front of the struggle to say, what are the issues of concerns that you are mostly concerned about as the student movement when we look at the geopolitical tensions that are going on? And what interventions are you proposing? And what are the practical steps that you are taking to ensure that those interventions are taken into consideration on a global level?
Okay, no, thanks. And we got lost because of some network issues. We apologize for that. We were trying to make a point, and we are also appealing to the movement, not only the ANC, the SACP, COSATU, the entire alliance, that we must not forget our role as a movement. What is our role in society? We must not donate our role to people that they don't have a historical understanding of what we and what we are doing and what we intend to do, because we believe that all these strategic theories of the movement, the NDR includes everyone in society in terms of having what kind of society we're looking for. So if we've been able to achieve a society where our people will have access to basic needs, our people who have access to basic needs must have access to water, clean water, clothing, shelter, all of those things that define humanity. But all in all, what we're fighting for us as people of this country and of the world having access to basic need for all of us, so that there's no one who is dehumanized in the process. Then we have your Sasco in a space of education and all of it. But the agenda is one. That is why we all agree that NDR is the way to go, because NDR will be able to put us in a national democratic society where all of us will have equal access to basic needs. So we can't then take away that responsibility and give it to someone who don't understand that actually this is the reason why we have this organization. This is the reason why we have the movement. That is why we are appealing that the ANC must not forget its role, because the ANC is a leader of society. The ANC is a leader of the mass democratic movement. So, of course, the national dialogue that we were speaking about, was the material conditions, if we were to be honest to ourselves, they dictate that now we must begin to involve other parties to form part of this discussion. How do we shape society moving forward? But the ANC itself must begin to do its own introspection to say, how did we arrive to where we are? You can't have that discussion in a national dialogue. You can only have that discussion within the structures of the movement to say, how do we arrive where we are? What went wrong? How can we fix it? Is it the national dialogue strategic platform to engage, of course, in the interest of our country? But the ANC also at the same time must not be selfish and say, we're just going to focus on us as a movement. But the ANC must have an interest of society. At some point, personally, when we lost elections, when we got less than 50%, in my a personal view that, hey, by the way, because people didn't give us majority vote, they must just take a seat back as the ANC or as the movement, and then people must just do as they please. Form government, because we never received majority. That was on early days when we received news that we got less than 50%. But later on, I realized that, by the way, it would be wrong for the ANC not to lead a discussion in terms of how can we stabilize the country. How can we form government so that the country is stable? So, in other words, I'm trying to say the ANC, even today, still has a responsibility to ensure that our country is stable, the economy is growing, our people have jobs, we fight poverty and inequality, triple oppression, and all of those things. But the ANC must begin to have a discussion within its ranks to see how can we regain hegemony. If it is a strategic move to go and engage civil society in that platform of national dialogue, let it be, but it must be informed by what has been a discussion within the mass democratic movement. I thought I should make that point. We accept national dialogue, but I'm sure when it happens, it's going to happen in the form of government and all of those things. But the ANC must inform government what kind of the things that must be discussed. Are those things strategic for the ANC, or they're taking us back and all of those? Because remember, as we have said earlier on, that the space is contested by many ideological differences. Those who are ruling, the ruling class will always want to maintain its relevance. They keep on revolutionizing themselves in order for them to be able to remain in power. And you must not fall into the trap where the capitalists want to use these platforms in order to ensure that they continue to enjoy hegemony as they are enjoying hegemony even today. Some of the things we need to be frank to ourselves, not on social media, not on other platforms, but in the platforms of the movement, where we're able to tell the movement, this is what we believe. We don't have to go outside and shout against one another. Let's get inside one room, we have a discussion, we're able to shape the country forward. I think I needed to make that point, Comrade Mkar, but also in terms of the questions that were asked in relation to the inequality in terms of universities and TVET colleges. It's something that within the organization itself we are also concerned about, because it's a long-standing issue that we've been trying to fight to ensure that because there's only one a member of Sasco pays 10 Rand membership fee is equal to, there's no golden membership. We're all members of the organization. We have equal rights, and the treatment must be the same. You see, so it's something that we had many programs, even in the form of how we've been able to engage even government to make TVET colleges institutions of choice as well, to develop them in terms of infrastructure, to develop them on many other things. For instance, one of the achievements that we are proud to pronounce that started last year is that you'll remember that in TVET colleges, the access in terms of accommodation, they used to get a less amount compared to a university student. But today, all of us in the sector, whether we are from a TVET or a university, the level of accommodation has been standardized. So those are the achievements that, in trying to close the gap between TVET and universities, we have made. The allowances, when it comes to food allowances, in the past, TVET used to get way less than what a university student will get. But through the interventions, and government was able to listen to Sasco, we now have a standardization of allowances for both meal allowances and accommodation allowance. So there are strides that are there in order to ensure that we balance the inequality that is there. Another thing that also must mention, comrade, is that the comrade that was asking that what is the advice we can give to the next leadership, I'm sure that person is aware that some of us are about to bow out in the organization. So what we can say is that we need to intensify, comrades, in ensuring that we educate our new members in the organization. We must collaborate with the likes of our Tambo School of Leadership. I'm going to emphasize this, and that collaboration, those programs of education, in my view, must happen at the branch level, because that is where we are recruiting. So you know that in Sasco we're taught that there's a difference between quantity and quality. So we're a mass-based organization, of course, we attract everyone. But when we've been attracted for whatever reason to join Sasco, within Sasco, then that is when you must be able to be transformed from quantity to quality leadership. And that process, in our view, I think it can only assist us if we can be able to do it at an early time where we're recruiting our members, so that when they grow within the organization, at least they are able to understand the basic principles of the revolution. They are able to understand the theory of the movement, because a theory of the movement is a very important theory. If you are unable to understand the theory of the movement, it's difficult for you to give analysis on other matters. So I'm appealing that the next leadership of Sasco must be able to ensure that at least they intensify programs at a branch level, educate our members, so that when they grow within the movement, at least they are capable people to be able to lead this country moving forward. We have said many things, Comrade Mkhari. This organization has produced a lot. Government, officials, the ministers, deputy ministers, private sector. By the way, the majority people who are at the helm of this country, from both government and private sector, have been produced by the student movement. So if we are not careful in terms of the quality of leaders that we're producing today, it means we're going to feed this nation the wrong people who are not going to take us forward, who are not going to be able to understand the society that we want to achieve, where it includes, where everyone has access to basic needs. So we must be careful in terms of the leaders that we're producing today. So we must be deliberate in educating ourselves moving forward. On other matters, you know that as a country, we're coming from a very bitter period where we experience apartheid. And when we speak about apartheid, we know what we're talking about, even if it was not us, but our forefathers, our heroes, our heroes who died outside the country. The discussion that the likes of Domano, the former SG of the ANC, who died in other countries, those people must come back and be buried in our country. So my point is that we cannot at any given point in time accept what is happening in Palestinians. We can't, because comrade, the late president of the ANC will tell you that South Africa is not free without the freedom of Palestinians. So in our view, we believe that we need a society where people are not deprived their right to vote. People are not deprived their right to participate in anything that they want to participate. We are for free society. So what is happening in Palestine is very painful. And the things that we have been doing as an organization, we've been in touch with the embassy and all other progressive organizations that on our campuses we've been able to do some mobilization, some consciousness to say people of Palestine must be freed from the apartheid. It's very painful because we're from a sector of education. It's very painful to see that in Palestine, children are not going to school, not because they don't want to go to school. They are not going to school because schools have been destroyed by the Israelis. Children, infants are being killed. So you can imagine that the future of this country, where it is, how it's looking, and all of those things. So we are appealing, and of course, what has been happening between Russia and Ukraine, we know very well that the imperialist forces are the ones who are at the helm of that particular war. They are funding Ukraine to fight against the Russian forces. So, but of course, we promote peace and stability. But peace and stability at the same time cannot be at the expense of neoliberal forces that they want to take charge of our globe. So, as an organization, as a movement, because if we are not paying attention to international challenges, we are running. It is very highly possible for us, because those matters, one way or the other, are going to influence us in this country. So we need to be deliberate in terms of having interest what's happening in the world, so that we're able to influence. Because South Africa is a very important country when it comes to the globe, very important. So, of course, it's informed by many factors. So our voice, indeed, is very important. And as Sasco, we've been mostly been active in terms of SADC region, where we've been having engagements with student movement from Swaziland. We're also concerned about what is happening in Swaziland. I must say it, Comrade Mkari. Their students are being victimized. They are being arrested and all of those things. So appealing also to our government that we need to ensure that the people of Swaziland are enjoying democracy as we're enjoying as well. You can't have our neighbors just here around Swaziland, where learners are being killed, student activists are being killed, and we're not saying anything as the government. So we're saying to our government, if we have to ensure that the relationship between our South African government and that of Swaziland is being cut on the basis that we are against the killing of young people and all of those things. Let it be. You can't enjoy a relationship with someone who's practicing undemocratic processes. Whereas if being kids, we are in communication with other leaders from those countries. We know what we're talking about. We've got facts. They're telling us that these are challenges that we're experiencing just here in your neighbor. So our view on those matters is that we are promoting peace and stability, but also we are promoting that our people must have access to basic needs. No one must be deprived a right to access education, because education is the future of this country. Education is the future of the continent.
No, thank you very much, President. We are reflecting on a legacy of 100 years, and the 3 years in particular for Sasco. So we therefore cannot have enough time to package all that needs to be discussed in one conversation. We were just really laying the basis for comrades to actually take, guide, and go and discuss these issues in their branches, in their study circles, in their friendship circles and comrade circles, because it's a very important issue to discuss. It's a very important reflection to make. And I must say, President, just from this conversation, the legacy that is on your shoulders, it's a very important legacy. And you cannot afford to fail to rise to the occasion, particularly at this critical moment where the NDR is under threat. It's under threat. And we need to understand that the National Democratic Revolution, it's under threat. It's not even just about the electoral outcomes. I mean, that is just a symptom of a bigger threat. And therefore, we wish you the best, President, in trying to resolve all of the challenges that you are faced with internally and externally. As the OR Tambo School of Leadership were there, as I said, we can have a conversation online as to how do we strengthen our relationship and what kind of programs do we engage in collectively to ensure that we respond to some of those challenges that you raised. But above and beyond, President, thank you so much for spending this time with us, despite the smaller witchcraft challenges of technology that we experienced. We really, really thank you, President. If you have any last words, I'll just give you your closing inputs and then we'll leave it at that.
No, thank you very much, Comrade Mkari, for having us. We indeed, this is an important month of our organization where we're celebrating 100 years of the student movement, of the student activism in this country, and also the 3 years of Sasco. And we are saying, what I want to say is that Sasco must be strong. It must overcome all the challenges that we're experiencing. The leadership that is going to enter, because we're going to a Congress this year, must be able to ensure that they take baton moving forward, because we need to see we need to see Sasco in the next 3 years to be strong, like how it is even today. So it must continue to survive, because if it's unable to survive, it means there's no one who's going to take responsibility and take leadership in terms of addressing these matters. And the best birthday gift that we can give it to Sasco, since it is our birthday month, is to ensure that we continue to win SRC elections as we've been winning them. We must reclaim the ground. I think that the best thing that we can give it to this organization is to regain the ground. Because if we are regaining the ground, it means the lives of our students are in safer hands. Because one of the things coming in Mkari that we tend to forget is that politics is not only about having to be elected. In essence, politics is about taking charge of the people's lives. So
Yes.
you can't give away that responsibility to anyone who don't have capacity to do so. So our movement has that capacity broadly in the ANC, Sasco, and all other organizations within the mass democratic movement have a responsibility to take care of the people's lives, and you can't give it away. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President, and have yourself a good night. There you have it, guys. That was the president of Sasco, President Vezinhlanhla Simelane. And we just had a very important discussion reflecting on the 100 years of the student movement and the 3 years of Sasco in particular. And I think this discussion is very close to my heart because myself, I'm a product of Sasco. Sasco has played a huge role in my leadership development, both as a person and as an activist. So I'm really concerned when we see the kind of challenges that are facing Sasco today and the broader student movement. But nonetheless, we are still hopeful that we'll overcome those challenges. Given the privilege that we have of being at the school, which was initiated to assist in resolving those challenges, we will play our part to ensure that we assist in resolving those particular challenges. In fact, Tintswalo's perspective is part of that intervention, because one of the things that has deteriorated to very worrying levels in the broader mass democratic movement is discourse, debate, and engagements of substance. At some point, the MDM was known as a leader of society in terms of providing thought leadership, amongst other things. But that quality has deteriorated. We no longer have substantive debates, substantive engagements. So that's why then we had to think of a creative way to get young people inculcated in the culture of discussing issues at a substantive level, engaging on different issues of national interest so that they're able to heighten their political consciousness, but also understand the responsibility they bear on their shoulders to actually actively participate in transforming society. So as I said, these conversations must not end here. You must mimic us as much as possible. If you can set up a group call on WhatsApp with your comrades and friends and have this reflective discussion that would be great. If you can call, a study circle or engagement circle where you discuss these issues, that would be great. If you're branch leaders, just call branch meetings where comrades discuss issues facing the locality, because we have that responsibility to provide thought leadership. And we can only do so if we are not afraid to debate. It's not about who's wrong, who's right. It's not about which idea is the best or the worst, but it's really coming together to discuss collectively, because out of that discussion, that's when we're going to get the best ideas. That's when we're going to sharpen and heighten our political consciousness. That's when we're going to come up with pragmatic programs that are able to provide the needed interventions in dealing with the societal issues that we're facing. So, with that being said, we thank you very much for also actively participating in the conversation, for your comments and questions, and for supporting this platform. I think the support that we've been receiving is really overwhelming, and we truly appreciate it. We can only grow from the support that you continue to show us. We hope that one day we'll actually be able to set up an actual podcast, where there are cameras and I'm sitting with these guests and having these discussions in person. And we can only achieve that if you continue to support us, but also keep supporting the work of the school. The school is there for you. Go to our website, take up our courses, and really engage with the programs of the school, because the school is an asset not only for the ANC and the broader mass democratic movement, but for society as a whole, because the work that we do speaks about developing leaders for social change, developing activists for social change. And we don't care whether you are an ANC member or not. For as long as you are interested in progressive ideas and you have an interest in true social transformation, the school is an asset that you can use for your own personal development, which will extend itself in the development of society as a whole. So thank you very much, comrades, and have yourselves a good night up until we meet next time. Same place, same platform, same time. Thank you very much, and have a blessed night.